operation was just carried out on a decommissioned aircraft carrier in San Francisco.
Oh my
And the
God.
idea of all this is to help fight alleged global warming by reducing the amount of sunlight that hits the Earth. I wonder what could go wrong with that. Now, look, this is part of a broader program of what's known as solar geoengineering and, of course, just climate geoengineering in general. They want to change the nature of the environment. And programs like this are beginning to gain
And turn the
momentum as a
moon
part of a
into
proposed
gas.
solution, maybe the final solution to climate change. Now, look, stories on these tests, they're starting to hit the big corporate media. The big corporate media is defending it, even promoting it. In fact, New York Times had a big puff piece about the recent tests, although theirs seems to be very much in support of the idea, I should note. And they're promoting the idea, it seems, of dimming the Earth to fight what they claim is climate change. Let me show you. This is New York Times. They say, a little before 9 a.m. on Tuesday, an engineer named Matthew Galilee crouched on the deck of a decommissioned aircraft carrier in San Francisco Bay, pulled on a pair of ear protectors, and flipped the switch. A few seconds later, a device resembling a snowmaker began to rumble, then produced a great and deafening hiss. They say that a fine mist of tiny aerosol particles shot from its mouth, traveling hundreds of feet through the air, and they say it was the first outdoor test in the United States of technology designed to brighten clouds and bounce some of the sun's rays back into space, a way of temporarily cooling a planet that is now dangerously overheating. Personally, I don't think the planet is dangerously overheating. I think this is based on false data monitored through sensors that were installed
It's
in
a
overly
way
hot
to make
places, like, for
money.
example, airport runways and so on. You put a sensor out in the scorching sun on like a tarmac, the temperature is going to be a little bit higher than you would elsewhere. And so they use the data on that and they create it in multiple locations.
Exactly.
They actually got rid of the sensors and then used computer generated technology, computer generated like projections of how hot things will get to just use the same trajectory of how hot it's getting to create this estimate to manufacture this narrative that the world is dangerously overheating. And frankly, I'd say that lying clowns like this, claiming the planet is now dangerously overheating, are leading people to do crazy things, for example, like trying to alter clouds to make it so that less sunlight hits the face of the Earth. But back to what they're saying. They say the scientists wanted to see whether the machine that took years to create could consistently spray the right size of salt aerosols through the open air outside of a lab. In other words, this bypasses some of the problems they're having with this technology. Remember last time we talked about this? Bill Gates, the guy who made Windows. He's not a scientist. He's not a doctor. He's Bill Gates, right? He's
He
not a
made
farmer.
the
He wasn't doing all these things.
vaccine.
Bill Gates was backing a plan to fly airplanes and to spray aerosols into the stratosphere to alter the nature of the entire stratosphere, to make it so that, again, there's almost like what you'd have during a volcanic eruption, which, by the way, if you look at history, the very one that they reference created plague and famine when it happened to the world, because volcanic ash covered the earth, blocked a certain amount of sunlight, the world became cold, we had a mini ice age, and it caused famine and death and plague around the entire world. And they want to artificially create something just like that, but they want to do it to fight climate change, they say. Now, besides that, the problem with the Bill Gates plan is that it requires them to get a bunch of airplanes, strap them with these things, and then fly them up into the air and then spray stuff into the stratosphere, which means they have to fly a bit higher than planes could normally fly, right? It's a bit of a complicated process because of that. The scientists being promoted by New York Times in this piece, though, they're talking about something you could just roll outside, hit a button, and it would just start spraying stuff. And the presumption here is that it would, using aerosols, go into the stratosphere, go into the clouds and so on, and begin altering the clouds. Now, they say this. They say if it works, the next stage would be to aim at the heavens and try to change the composition of clouds above the Earth's oceans. Not joking, folks. This is what they're saying.
They're idiots.
Look, just to make it clear, they're saying that they want to change the composition of clouds in order to brighten them and, quote, bounce some of the sun rays back into space. And they believe, hypothetically, that by doing so, they're going to cool the planet. Now, first of all, this is messing with the very idea of whether the whole thing is real or fake in the first place, whether we're actually facing a crisis, and of course, whether significantly altering the planet in such a way would cause an even more serious crisis, or whether, frankly, it's just some imaginary thing in the first place and they're creating a problem over something that doesn't exist. But look, in other words, what they're doing is they're loading the clouds with aerosols in order to make them more dense, and they're doing this to reduce the temperature of the Earth by trying to make it so that we and plants and everything else on this planet get less sunlight. Now, look, I would personally question a lot of things with this. Aside from the overall issue that I personally have with global warming, I believe it's the doomsday theory of an insane political cult. But even beyond that, how would altering the clouds affect rainfall? Have you thought about that? If you make the clouds more dense, what does that mean for clouds doing what they normally do, collecting, water and then rain, creating rain and so on, to keep everything alive on the planet? What would happen if you alter the clouds and it affects rainfall? What would that mean for crops? What would that mean for us? How would this affect plant life, for that matter, even just aside from crops? What about trees and everything else that grows on the green earth, right? What does it mean for us and everything else in this world if everything is just a bit darker? If they make the whole world dark? Well, look, the problem is, even beyond that, it's not just limited to this program. It's not just this crazy scientist thinking he can change the earth for the better, right? Thinking he can wheel this thing out, hit his switch, and just spray aerosols into the clouds. It's not limited to this. There are many, many programs like this. And all of them, I think, are Dr. Evil level insane. They're all trying to alter the atmosphere in different ways, and each of which I would deem a threat to this world. I would say every one of these things is just as much, if not more so, a threat to the planet as the imagined crisis they're trying to say this is the answer to. And each of these, really, if you take them all the things they're doing, and you compound them with, the next ones and so on, they are creating a man-made threat. They are significantly trying to alter the world right now, and they're building massive facilities and operations that are doing things like this across the board, each one playing their own little role, and I would say they're going to manufacture a disaster if they keep it up. But back to the New York Times piece, right? After they say their prayers about the need to fight global warming and reduce the temperatures of the earth, they then go on into other programs we've discussed before, like carbon capture. They're building facilities. There's already some in operation. They're building these in different parts of the world, carbon capture facilities. Remember, I did a whole episode on these before. I want to go back and watch them. But the theory is this: they have these technologies that suck carbon out of the air, right? We breathe out CO2. Plants need it to breathe and so on. If you suck it out, you're probably going to kill the plant life, but regardless, they're doing it. They suck that out of the air, they capture it, and they inject it into groundwater. And they say it's safe there, right? Now, these concepts are pretty dang controversial, right? Even by people who otherwise drink the punch, so to speak. And as they note, the Biden administration is funding research on these programs.
More wasted tax dollars.
Is, in fact, only recently, in fact, funding research programs on solar geoengineering. And even the ones that are not being currently researched, like carbon capture, they're actually building them. And there's a corrupt business behind it where they sell carbon credits. When companies talk about being net zero, what they really do, they don't technically change their practices. It's not like the oil companies stop selling oil. What they do is they buy carbon credits from these insane, psycho factories, which, claim we captured X amount of carbon, and then they sell the credits of the X amount of carbon they got out of the atmosphere to these private businesses until you reach a level where they say it's net zero, right? They have to buy one carbon credit for every piece of carbon that they, emit, and that's how they reach net zero. The effect of that is they end up financing this entire subsector of industry which is, at least in my opinion, risking detrimentally destroying the environment, ironically under the narrative of saving the environment when it comes to things like this. But back to New York Times, there's even noting the Biden administration itself is even trying to distance itself from this concept, solar geoengineering. Even if they support carbon capture, even if they support all these other crazy things, solar geoengineering is kind of the next step of crazy. Too crazy even for some of the really insane radicals who fully buy into this stuff. It's too crazy even for them. But New York Times is promoting it. They note this. They say universities, foundations, private investors, and the federal government have started to fund a variety of efforts from sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to adding iron to the ocean in an effort to store carbon dioxide on the seafloor.
God.
I wonder how that's going to affect the world, folks. They note further in, brightening clouds, again, solar geoengineering, is one of several ideas to push solar energy back into space. In other words, make sure some of that sunlight
New York
doesn't
Times,
hit us,
naturally they
doesn't
would.
reach the planet. They just reflect it right back, right? They say it's sometimes called solar radiation modification, solar geoengineering, or climate intervention. So if you hear anybody say solar radiation modification, solar geoengineering, or climate intervention, know what they are referring to. They're referring to, again, having this like, Mr. Burns's type thing and like The Simpsons where they want to put something up to like block sunlight from hitting the planet. Something that was regarded as utterly criminally insane in the past is now regarded as, hey, plausible solutions to the crisis they've manufactured. But New York Times notes that compared with other options, such as injecting aerosols into the stratosphere, again, one of the things that Bill Gates is promoting, for example, they say marine cloud brightening, the one that they're promoting, would be localized and use relatively benign sea salt aerosols as opposed to other chemicals, but with the same effect, of course, of reducing the sunlight. They note further in, and yet the idea of interfering with nature is so contentious, organizers of Tuesday's test kept the details tightly held. They're keeping it a secret. They're trying to keep it hidden. And they note the concern that critics would try to stop them. Although the Biden administration is funding research into different climate interventions, including marine cloud brightening, the White House distanced itself from the California study, the one that they're promoting here. Sending a statement to the New York Times that read, quote, the U.S. government is not involved in the solar radiation modification SRM experiments
Everybody's
taking place
crazy
in Alameda,
in California anyway.
or anywhere else. Wild stuff, folks. Wild stuff. Now remember, oftentimes when you hear them doing these kinds of things, it sounds too crazy to believe, oftentimes at first. But you have a lot of individuals who are, in fact, moving it forward. In a previous episode, I went over many of the different types of solar geoengineering that are currently being researched and some of the tests that are taking place. There are, in fact, very large-scale programs being promoted by very large organizations trying to do this. The World Economic Forum, as I noted in a previous episode, has a program where they want to launch into space a giant, basically, bag that will reflect some of the sunlight back away from the Earth in space using
That
this
is
giant,
a crazy bag
again,
of
it looks
folks
like a
there.
giant plastic bag. They're trying to do that. The Bill Gates program that they're trying to promote is the one regarding, of course, injecting aerosols directly into the stratosphere. This program, for example, is looking to inject aerosols just from the ground, again, using what they call sea salt to do it, right? But they claim it's just that, using aerosols and that. There are a lot of programs like this. Even just once is the equivalent of driving a car over 6 miles. Folks, it turns out that wearing jeans is now a cause of climate change. Daily Mail said they might be an essential piece of everyday clothing, but scientists now say that even a simple pair of jeans could be bad for the environment. Wearing a pair of fast fashion jeans just once creates 2.5 kilograms of CO2, the equivalent of driving a petrol car 6.4 miles. They say that scientists from Guangdong University in China, by the way, of technology analyzed the life cycle of a pair of Levi's jeans from growing the cotton to their eventual disposal. And it says that they found that some jeans were worn only 7 times, earning them the classification of fast fashion, and produced 11 times more CO2 than jeans worn more often. Dr. Ya Zhou, the study's lead author, says this, quote, "The humble wardrobe staple, a pair of jeans, has a significant impact on the environment." Now, look, we know how good the CCP is on the environment. And frankly, any research organization in China is going to have ties to the CCP. There's no exception to it. So I don't know if Fraser promoted this study from a bunch of crony communists in China. We know the CCP controls a lot of the green energy market as well. Thanks, it also can really, right, because they can push policies that restrict production outside of China. They don't have to follow these things in China. When the rest of the world agrees in the Paris Climate Accord, it makes restrictions on development in Europe and in the United States and other countries. It makes us cut back on production and ruin our economies. But it has no restrictions on China, the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, it is in their interest to claim that our products are causes of the problem so they can restrict our industries and then take us over in the markets. Of course, they are behind this. Not only that, but they control the rare earth minerals that are essential to the creation of these things. They control the mines that are, again, creating the parts needed for these things, solar panels or whatever else. They're stealing technology, manufacturing things using our stolen technology, and then undercutting our own businesses, even in government contracts in the United States. One example of this is the wind turbines. China stole that technology from America and then wins bids manufacturing things they stole from us, oftentimes even against some of the companies they stole it from in the first place, and get government money to build them. Of course the CCP is promoting this. But back to the point of jeans. This ties into something else. Do you remember in a recent episode I went over this whole governor agreement where they want to reduce the consumption of meat, where they want to reduce consumerism, they want to make it so there's less options in stores? Do y'all remember we were talking about this? We were saying they want to reduce the number of options. I showed you their actual reports saying this. They stated this intent. They want to make it so that meat becomes a luxury, a rare luxury, let's say. They want to make it more expensive. And so they need to reduce the consumption of meat. How do you reduce the consumption of meat? Remember, New York and other major cities, they are directly involved in this program. They're signed on to this program. They want to reduce the consumption of meat. They also want to reduce the amount you can fly airplanes. They want to reduce the amount that you drive. And they want to reduce the number of options you have when you go to buy clothes every year. If you remember, there was a viral report going around where a lot of media were saying the World Economic Forum wants you to have a uniform. There were some technical errors with that narrative, but the basis of it was this. They want to reduce the amount of clothes you purchase every year. And as part of that program, they want to reduce the amount of options you have from companies that manufacture these types of products.
And
now, take that into account with what's being coming out of Guangdong in China, where they're claiming jeans are a cause of climate change. What is the natural presumption with this? Well, maybe we should buy less jeans. Maybe we should make it so that people wear them more than 7 times, which was the narrative being promoted from China, claiming to be the cause of climate change, that people don't wear their clothes enough. What is the possible outcome of this? Well, maybe buy less clothes and wear your clothes more, which means what? You do exactly what that government agreement globally says we should do. It means it's fitting in with that narrative. It means it's lining up with that agenda. It means this is exactly what they said they wanted to do, and now they're creating a fake scientific basis on which to build that platform. At least in my opinion, that's what they're doing. Now, look, soon also, you may just have to drive an electric car. They're not very popular right now. People are not buying them. They're just decaying in car lots and so on because people do not want them. And so rather than try to change the market and build something else that people actually do want, the Biden administration is taking another route. They're trying to make it so you have no choice. Because, folks, they're talking about how wearing a pair of jeans can cause climate change and it's equal to driving a car. But speaking of driving a car, folks, you might not have a choice but to get an electric vehicle very soon. Because the Biden administration has a new mandate out to eliminate your freedom to make a choice on this. USA Today says that Biden, however, also is not being upfront with the public about what his new Environmental Protection Agency rule actually means. It says the headline announcing the EPA Environmental Protection Agency mandate last month proclaims, quote, Biden-Harris administration finalizes strongest ever pollution standard for cars that positions U.S. companies and workers to lead the clean vehicle future, protect public health, address the climate crisis, save drivers money. Well, geez, I mean, who doesn't want to protect workers and save money and, have better health? Geez, that sounds fantastic. But what does it mean in practice? That's the question. It notes that as the most bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo, right, the meaning is less than clear. It says, they'll translate it for us. Quote, if you like your current gas-powered car, SUV, or truck, too bad, because very soon you may not be able to have it. They say the final rule, which begins in earnest in 2027, just a few years away, by the way, right? That's only 3 years away, folks. It demands that automakers quickly amp up production of electric vehicles by 2032, the emissions standard. It dictates that roughly 70% of new vehicle sales have to be battery-powered electric or hybrids. I would question. You can mandate production. You can mandate that car companies have to have 70% of their vehicles be, hybrids or electric cars, right? Technically, you can mandate that. But how do you mandate purchases? How do you mandate new vehicle sales? Well, everyone, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.